we'll kick it off. Thank you for joining today. So I just want to introduce myself. My name's Steve Burns. I'm the Vice President of Account Management at SAFEbuilt. Been with SAFEbuilt for 11 years. And we wanted to put a webinar together to talk about innovative solutions that modern cities are dealing with, and invite a panel of folks, industry experts, and we'll have them introduce themselves, and we'll go through some discussion points, and we'll wrap it up with some questions and answers. Cheryl, you want to kick us off?
Thank you, Steve, and it's a pleasure to be with you all this afternoon and facilitate this conversation. My name is Cheryl Scully. I recently retired from city management, having worked in 3 cities in 3 different states over 45 years, most recently in San Antonio, Texas, as city manager from 2005 to 2019. As one of the fastest growing cities in the country, and in my previous position in Phoenix, another fast growing southwestern city. Lots of emphasis on building and development services, permitting, platting, and those land use activities for a growing community. Also some renovation and redevelopment work. So I'm happy to be here to facilitate, and we have some excellent panel members that will also be discussing their experiences as we talk about innovations in building. And Eric Anthony Johnson is with us from the city of Dallas. And Dr. Johnson, I'd like to ask you to introduce yourself next.
Thank you, Cheryl. Yes, I'm Dr. Eric Anthony Johnson. I'm the Chief of Economic Development, Housing, Neighborhood Services, and Sustainable Development and Construction for the city of Dallas. So I have oversight of all things economic development, housing, urban design and planning, and the entire building permitting process to include historic preservation. And and we'll probably talk about this throughout the discussion, but we're really sort of at a point in Dallas where we are really trying to gear up for the future. And what that basically means is we're part of the DFW region, but we're really trying to figure out ways to really separate ourselves by focusing on greater efficiency, speed to the market, and looking at basically how we really retool ourselves to be the best city we could be. So I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Great, thank you, Dr. Johnson. Next we have Erica Roberts, and Erica is here from Milwaukee, Wisconsin. So Erica, please introduce yourself.
Well, good afternoon. Thank you, Cheryl. It's a pleasure to be here, everyone, to meet with you virtually today. I've been with the city of Milwaukee. This is my 21st year, and I always joke that I'm homegrown, and that's kind of unique here for us as the Commissioner of Building Inspection, which is the position that I've held now for the past 2 years. Moved my way through the city, starting as an inspector, did all the jobs into management, supervisory roles, and deputy roles for ultimately Commissioner 2 years ago next month. In the city of Milwaukee, our building inspection program is housed within the Department of Neighborhood Services, which does all of the construction trades type inspections. We also do all plan reviews as well as code compliance, outreach, demolition, and some development as well in the department. We're a department of about 240 employees, which is down from a few years ago. We were up to about 280, so we're certainly seeing our share of budget cuts and some of the heartburn that comes with that. Also, I don't know who's on the line with us, but I always like to just say I am the first female building commissioner here in Milwaukee, and I wear that title very proudly, and I'm always an advocate for bringing women into what there are more male-held roles. So I look forward today. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Erica. And last we have Bill Herbert, who's with us from Nashville. Bill, please introduce yourself.
Good afternoon, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm Bill Herbert. I'm the director of the Department of Codes Administration for Metro Nashville. I'm a Nashvilleian, born and raised. My family has been in Nashville since the late 1700s. I'm a land use attorney by trade. I was the zoning administrator for Metro Nashville for a number of years before being asked to take over the director's position for the Department of Codes, and I took that over in 2018. Nashville has experienced unprecedented growth in the last couple of years. Each year, even during a COVID year, significantly surpassed previous years. This last year, we did just over $4.6 billion in construction value, even during a COVID year. That's huge for this city. We never expected that. So it's a pleasure to be here and looking forward to it. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Bill. And having recently visited Nashville, I can see all the construction going on. So you have your hands full. That's obvious. Steve, did you have any other remarks, or shall we launch right into the conversation?
I think we're ready to dive in. Got some good subject matter to discuss. So thank you. Let's
Okay, great.
If you do have questions, feel free to drop them in the chat box or the question box. We'll have a session for that at the end. That's my to add.
Thanks, Amanda. Okay, as we get started this afternoon, we're going to talk about several areas that are important for managing building construction within our communities in an excellent way. We'll be covering staffing challenges, some of the budgeting challenges. Cities always have budgeting challenges. Backlog challenges, how we are able to best service our private sector that's doing the building, some of the digital transformation and best practices that are being used in the country. And if we have time, talk about attracting developers as well as retaining business and legislative issues. So let's begin with some of the staffing challenges, because we know talent is critically important excuse me, to the conducting of our business in a very excellent way. So Eric, let me ask you to begin, since you come from a major city with a lot of staff, but also challenges in recruitment and training. What tools are you using to recruit talent, and what steps are you taking in Dallas with regard to licensing and certifications for your inspectors?
Yeah, good question, Cheryl. So here's basically where we are in Dallas. Let me start with the challenge first. Our challenge really is in retaining staff, in particular related to the pay issue, and knowing that the private sector is actually paying more than what our staff are actually making. So truthfully, our biggest challenge right now is actually in retainment, coinciding with retirement. So we have longtime staff that's been with the city for years, starting to exit out. And at the same time, we're trying to simultaneously hire. And one of our challenges in that context, again, is about the time it takes to get through the process to advertise and to attract people. That is a challenge, not so much on the budgeting side for us, because we're dominated by enterprise fund in terms of, so we sit, somewhat outside the general fund. But our biggest challenge really is about how do we, and we're facing this every day. I even dealt with it earlier this morning, about people leaving the city, taking jobs in the private sector that's paying much more than what we can pay at the city. So we're really trying to beef this up with bringing forward new training opportunities, new opportunities to take on greater sort of projects that can continue to build skill sets and provide them some opportunities outside of the pay, with the hopes of retaining people. So we have a massive set of opportunities continuing to come our way. And right now, that's really what we're trying to focus on, quite honestly. Oh, thank you, on mute. There it is.
I guess I'll leave myself unmuted so we can jump in here. Erica, perhaps you could talk about what you're doing with regard to pay scales. Are you able to be competitive with the private sector? We hate to be the training grounds in local government and then lose those well-trained staff to the private sector for maybe 50 cents to $1 an hour more in the pay range. What are you able to do in Milwaukee?
Yeah, sadly not much, to be very honest. And you're absolutely right. We do find that we are a bit of a training ground for individuals who come on in. They learn all the skills. They may get additional certifications, gain experience in large metropolitan areas, seeing a variety of projects, and then either losing them to the private sector or even smaller surrounding municipalities. It's not uncommon for us to sort of hold our breath every time we see a local job announcement for a surrounding community, because we wonder who's going to leave us and go there. And I think some of these smaller communities may be at a better, they only need one or two employees, multiple credentialed employees who can kind of do everything for them. So they're able to offer slightly better benefits, slightly better pay, and other incentives to get someone to change and come on over. I mean, budgets are tough, and unfortunately the city has made announcements that there are no pay increases. There is very little negotiation available to us, salary pay. So what applies to us applies to every other position throughout the city, with the exception of Warren. And we find ourselves in a very difficult spot to both recruit and retain staff.
Yeah. Bill, have you found that it's been more difficult to train and provide continuing education during the pandemic? I know some administrators and city managers I've spoken with have said that Zoom has, and meetings like this that are virtual, make it a little bit easier to conduct that kind of training and recruitment without travel. But what's been your experience in terms of attracting and retaining staff during this COVID situation?
Our situation in Nashville seems to be identical with that in Milwaukee and Dallas. During the COVID pandemic, the training has actually become easier for us. Whereas before we were having to do it, most of it in person, and trying to get the people to come and do those trainings proved problematic just for scheduling purposes. Now our inspectors can get their training in their car. They can get it in the office, off their laptops. So that aspect of it for us has been markedly easier, but it's the same thing as in Milwaukee and Dallas for us, in that we'll get people, we'll hire them, we'll get them trained up, and then we will lose them to either the private sector or, as previously mentioned, to smaller municipalities that are able to pay more. It's been truly difficult for us to retain people. And for the most part, in terms of our building inspectors, you know, we're a bit of, we're an old department compared to places like IT and other places, because who are we really attracting? We're attracting the construction workers who are tired of working in the heat. And now all of a sudden they've got a family and they need good insurance. And so we attract those, but these are the people that we hold on to, but because we're relatively old, we lose them to retirement. So we're facing the same thing everybody else is facing. It seems to be a common thread. I'm glad we're not alone in that in Nashville.
You mentioned working in the heat. I used to live up north. I remember it being pretty cold, but for a good portion of the year, a little warmer down here in Texas, nonetheless. You mentioned something though that is critical, Bill, and that is those who are approaching retirement. That is, what will happen, and what are you doing to prepare for those who will be retiring? Those are the seasoned staff that you can count on, that actually coach and mentor some of the other staff members within the building inspections area. What are you seeing with regard to the retirement push?
Well, about a year ago, we had a situation where we lost over 200 years of experience in about 2 months' time to retirement. And so that's devastating to us to have that type of experience walk out the door. Trying to replace that is really verging on impossible, because I'm sure other cities have this problem, but for us, we're regulated by the Civil Service Commission. So All the hiring process is really out of our hands until such time as we're handed a list of applicants that are ready to be interviewed. We then hire an individual. We then train that individual, and that takes time, and then to get them certified, more time. So trying to replace experience that walks out the door is very, very problematic, and I haven't found a solution to it yet, other than just to do the best we can with what we got.
Erica or Eric, you want to comment on a solution with regard to replacement of those who are retiring? Erica, you've had your hand up.
I won't say it's a solution, but really what we're doing here in Milwaukee and have been very successfully for a number of years is our intern program. The city of Milwaukee is very focused on bringing jobs and developing a workforce with city residents. And so every year we get about 16 or so individuals that are filled with a variety of individuals who come from a variety of backgrounds. And they start very basic. They have to go to school. The city pays them to go to school, a building inspection certification through a local tech college. And at the same time that they're going to school, they also work for us. So half in school, half here as far as their time. And they start by performing very, very basic inspections and build them from there. It's traditionally a 2-year program. From there, they tend to go into our code enforcement areas. And then we actually are working hard. One of the things I've been focusing on is trying to make a transition between code enforcement and some of the construction trades inspections when we have qualified individuals. We're also currently pursuing a similar program through the construction trades, which will look a little bit more like an apprenticeship, but it'll be very
Yeah, let me add something to,
Sure.
I'm gonna use the experience going out the door. This may sound sort of strange, but we're actually going through a retooling, and it's actually not such a bad idea that the old experience is going out the door, because we're faced with this, well, this is the way we've been doing things, and it's sort of the same thing over and over, and that old process is not meeting the speed and the demand in terms of what we're dealing with. So what we're really trying to do now is find those employees that are sort of in that sort of middle, that are eager to do great work and that are ready to step up and provide them with opportunities. That's really how we're looking at it, because don't get me wrong, I love the historic talent, but I'm not sure if that historic is going to be the thing that's going to move us forward. So we're really trying to tap the energy of what we know are untapped individuals as we start to try and bring in more people. That's really how we're starting to look at it.
Well, that's a smart strategy, Eric. In fact, as I look to replace department heads at the city of San Antonio, when I was brought in to do a turnaround in that organization, I consistently looked at number 2 people in cities that were doing things well, people who were hungry for advancement and eager to take on a greater leadership role. So that's a smart strategy.
Yep.
Okay, let's move on to budgeting. Budgets are always a concern when we're in public or private sector. In San Antonio, I did move the building services department out of the general fund into an enterprise operation so that income covered expense. What I heard from the private sector was that they were willing to pay more, but they wanted to make sure they received the service for what they were paying for inspections and plating and all of those permitting kinds of activities. What has been the most difficult part in city development for your budgeting and planning? Erica, let's start with you. And how do you manage, and how do upticks in permit activity affect your budget? Are you able to make adjustments and be nimble in a quick way to respond? Time is money to the private sector, and so we know that we need to get those permits approved, the inspections done with quality and consistency so they can be in their business operation. How do you approach your budgeting in Milwaukee?
Yeah, thank you for that. That's a really tough question for me to answer. I'm in the thick of my budget season right now. Unfortunately, we are a cost to continue budget always, and any of our revenues go into the general fund. So we pay for ourselves. Certainly our permit desk and our development center pays for the majority of the department, as they're really our financial workhorses. But when it comes to being nimble and being able to adjust up and down, unfortunately, we just don't have that type of authority. Number of positions with a variety of experience levels within each position, so we can adjust between different plan reviewers, for example, as things come in. We always try to keep the same plan reviewer assigned to larger projects so they don't get a fresh set of eyes and start over midway. But admittedly, I think this is an area in which Milwaukee can improve because we're just sort of stuck. And we can offer a concierge service that gets you to the front of the line faster for some additional money. But even then, if we had too many of those, we really wouldn't be able to accommodate all that much. Full transparency, I'm excited to hear what others offer in this area.
Bill, how are you navigating scaling up and down depending upon your spikes in volume, or as happened during COVID, as well as back in the Great Recession, we had a downturn in the number of permits that were pulled and then didn't need as much staff. How are you handling that from a budget standpoint?
So Nashville and the codes department, we are a general fund. We're not an enterprise fund. So that means that we do not get to keep any of our permit fees that we generate. Every year we'll turn back well over $1 million back to the general fund. So I'm very limited as to my budget. So my budget is basically set for me by the administration and then basically ratified by the Metro Council. So about the best that I can do is lobby for more people. But I'll say this. So how do you effectively lobby for more people? Well, you have to have, it has to be justified somehow. You have to be able to back it up. So right now, I've got some third-party consultants in taking a look at all of our development processes, analyzing them to see how we can do this better. How can we be more efficient? But historically, and during COVID, I'm going to give great accolades to our administration and council in that they've given me wide latitude to make pretty radical decisions to do things to keep Nashville moving. I only have a staff of about 120 people, and Nashville is growing by leaps and bounds. It's very difficult for us to keep up. So how do we do that? Well, our solution has been to utilize technology. I'm not going to get any more people, so we have to be smarter in the way that we do our jobs. We have to become more efficient. And we've done that. And just by example, I took our building inspectors and took away. We had previously had. I'm sorry, I was getting a telephone call. I got to shut it off. We were having a number of days in delay in getting building inspectors done. So the reason for that was because our building inspectors all didn't have cars. A building inspector without a car is not a building inspector at all. So what do? We got away from fleet management. We went and started renting all of our cars. Now we have a contract with a rental car company. Now every inspector has a car every single morning, and our inspections have turned around to next day service across the board. You know, that's just a win by just trying to think out of the box. And we've done that repeatedly with our IT department. And it's worked well for us. So there's about the best I can answer.
Good. Eric, you have anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, so in Dallas, we are enterprise fund. And so we don't get into discussions with the general fund. I won't give the dollar amount that we have in reserve via the enterprise fund, but I will tell you it is a pretty significant amount of money. And we are quickly realigning our approach to better utilize our resources. We will be doing more third-party reviews. We're going to be introducing some different models heading to the Economic Development Committee meeting in March. We're going to boost training, everything across the board, because we're not really constrained by the resources, believe it or not. We're more constrained by lack of innovation and creativity, quite honestly. And we have to really bust through that portion of it to better utilize our resources, and that is what the city council is after.
Yeah, that's good. I know I use this example when I talk with folks who ask questions about building services, that during the Great Recession, had we not converted to an enterprise operation, I know that we would not have contracted as quickly as we should have, given the reduction in requests for building permits and platting in the community, because construction basically came to a halt. We had a department of more than 300, but we reduced 70 positions over that year. And we did that through attrition. We didn't lay people off. We offered them other opportunities, or they left as but we were able to keep that enterprise operation balanced. Of course, we carried a reserve as well to accommodate increases. But then as the economy returned, we were able to staff up again. And people were anxious to get back into that operation. I think we all want to be employers of choice. We don't want to be a last resort for those in the building field in the community, and it takes a special effort to do that, including competitive wages. So that's something to keep in mind as well. Let's move on, talk about backlog challenges. Bill, you mentioned how much activity is going on in Nashville. I know some of us who have been there. I was at ICMA a couple of years ago in Nashville, and we just saw a tremendous amount of redevelopment, especially in that downtown area. Do you have backlog challenges, and do you supplement that with outside contracting? Are you able to hire up quickly, or do you use the private sector to help you?
So that's a great question. And the answer is kind of a little bit of all of the above. I think Dr. Johnson had mentioned third-party reviews. We too are doing that, and we've been utilizing it, and we're formalizing a process right now to try to help with that. I guess maybe fortunately or misfortunately, in terms of development in Nashville, generally speaking, the codes department is not going to be the department that would slow down any particular project. Other departments are having worse issues than we are, quite frankly. So in terms of our plan review, while it may take X number of days, perhaps disconcertingly, other departments are taking longer. So when it comes to people that complain about things taking too long, usually the complaints don't come to us because we're not the slowest part of the process.
Okay, Erica, how are you handling some of the spikes in activity? Are you using the private sector, outside contract, third party to help you in that regard, or are you limited to your own city staff?
Currently, we are limited to city staff. The political climate here in Milwaukee is just not open to outsourcing positions. And like I said prior, there is such an intense focus on trying to bring jobs to city residents that it's probably to the detriment of the departments right now because we are sort of locked into some very strict criteria for contracting and hiring. We are booming. I have the world's tallest mass timber structure being built about a block away from my office, amongst with many, many other large projects, just like any other major metropolitan city right now. We also experienced about a 30% turnover in our plan review section in the last 6 months. Some through promotion, great, but the learning curve right now is just tremendous for our team. So we offer about a 15 business day turnaround. Admittedly, we are closer probably to 5 weeks.
Yeah. How long does it take until plan review delays generate complaints from the residents and developers? Eric, you have a feel for that. You're new to Dallas, relatively new. You're overhauling the department.
Yeah, I am now the customer service representative for the council. All I do is answer complaints related to the permitting process. So it's I can't give you the number, but I can tell you it's a onslaught every single day. And but that leads me to where we're really going with this. You know, we faced some serious backlogs, and we started utilizing third-party reviewers. We will be introducing a new private provider model in October, but it's all designed as pressure valve relievers for staff. And I'm trying to get them to understand this is not about jobs exiting. It's about providing relief for you guys so we can have the ability to create the types of processes and structures that's going to help. So we're anticipating the private provider model will probably carry 30 to 40% of the request. And just by way of example, I was on the line with the school district today. They informed me that they have 29 schools coming through the permitting system, our processes in 2022. And, you know, we're looking at a team structure concept tied to performance, backed by the support with the third-party reviewers and a private provider model. And that's really where we're headed, because I don't know where else to go right now. But to the original question, a lot of time taking to answer questions. And our problem really is in pre-screen. Once you go from pre-screen to the time for the first review is averaging somewhere around 6 to 8 weeks before you actually get a response back. And all of that is with this Project Doc system that's on an old technology platform going back 15 to 18 years. So you get the sort of picture of what's happening. So I'm gonna change my title from Chief of Economic Development to Chief of Customer Service.
Well, I think all of us are probably in the customer service business as well. And I'm reflecting back when I was recruited to San Antonio, the mayor and council had just conducted a survey of the business and development community. And of course, they were overwhelmed with the response that they received. The city had created what was called a one-stop center where you could get a permit or any of your development functions, although the community had taken to calling it the last stop or the final stop center because it seemed that everything stopped there and they wanted an overhaul. And we put together a task force of those developers who were most vocal, some of the contractors in the community. I even offered up my inspector that inspected my home as I moved to the community because he gave me an earful as well. And we came up with recommendations that we were able to work through and implement with the right leadership. I changed the leadership in the department and we were able to get that turned around and now it's used as a model, but it's a process. It doesn't happen overnight.
Let me just add something to that. We're trying something new. We established an executive in residence to help us in the building sort of retooling. So we actually have the former head of real estate and construction for Goldman Sachs in as our executive in residence to really help buffer us with the development community to really ultimately get to a point where we can retool the system. We don't have a year to do this. We probably have at best 6 months to really turn this ship. So I just wanted to add that point.
Well, I'm glad you did. That's an excellent suggestion and way to go about it. You mentioned technology. I think Bill and Erica also mentioned it. Bill, you want to make a comment about technology that your team is using to help be better, what those innovations are and best practices that have enabled you to improve service?
Dr. Johnson hit on one of them that we did a couple of years back and are still trying to finish up. And that is we're getting all of the development departments on a common platform. That has been really instrumental because when we open up a building permit application and all the relevant departments are able to see what the other departments are doing and read their comments, etc., that has really been very, very beneficial. Plus, we put that platform out there for the general public so that any developer at any time can look and see exactly what the status of their permit application is or what the status of their permit is in terms of what inspections have been done, which have passed, which have failed, what are yet to be done. So it's kind of a barometer of the entire development process, and it has helped. It's been a common denominator, if you will, that has really helped Nashville move more seamlessly. And also, I mean, I just hats off to our IT community and a lady named Amy Neal, who just solves all of our IT problems. She's unbelievable in what she does. And if we need little tweaks with our system or whatever, they're just on it. They have made our lives infinitely easier and made us infinitely more efficient than we were. I just can't say enough about them.
Wow. Erica, what's the most valuable technology that you are currently using? Do you have an example or two that you might be able to share with our listeners today?
Sure. I think technology is actually one of the wins in the COVID situation, in that we did transition most of our staff to a more of a work from home model last spring and through the most of last year and into this year. So something as basic as having your team work off iPads so that there's real-time updating of inspection results and management of their days, both from the employee standpoint, but then also from their supervisor's standpoint. So they're able to check in and know where their team is at any given point in time. And for us as well, that does tie into that single platform idea that others have talked about. We began that transition in 2016. We're still in it, but with the goal being all city departments coming on board with their particular modules. I would also say we transitioned our permit center from what I used to call the DMV. People just sat around and they waited for their number to be called and they got assistance, to using a technology called QList, which is an online scheduling system. So now, especially because we're still in COVID to some extent, we don't offer walk-in service. It's by invitation, appointment only, utilizing QList. And first I was nervous that this would frustrate some of our customers, but we've received tremendous feedback from the development community, who's just happy to know that they have a time that they're going to come in and sit down and get their plans moving forward.
Yeah, that's great. Let's move on to talking about attracting development to the community. And Eric, Dr. Johnson, maybe you could start, since you have a tremendous economic development background as well. What are the greatest opportunities in Dallas for attracting more development, and given your situation with your building changes that you're implementing, how will you handle that new development?
Yeah, it's a great question. So back in May of 26, the council adopted a pretty sweeping unanimous vote regarding a new economic development policy. And what's important about that is the policy came with a one-year transition to correct the things we need to correct to better put Dallas in a position so that the policy would be successful. In the middle of all of that is the permitting process, because become May 26, 2022, the policy will be effective. So the game plan is to have our permitting process moving at all cylinders so that we can ease the permitting process to basically attract developers, because what we're hearing now is the process is too difficult. I'm going to go to Fort Worth, I'm going to Austin, I'm going to Arlington, I'm going to San Antonio, I'm going everywhere but Dallas. That is really what we're up against. And the other component is we have a section of Dallas, which is called Southern Dallas, which is below I-30 south of the Trinity River. It only represents 15% of the city's tax base, yet that is the bulk of the city's landmass. So the policy is also calling for how do we realign an under-served area to draw in development. So there's lots of things going on. It's coming with the creation of a new economic development entity, came along with the policy that will launch in the first quarter of 2022. So all of this is in alignment, including the permitting process, new entity, looking at infrastructure policies, everything we have, with the intent of being ready come May 26, 2022. With that, we want to be able to communicate that Dallas is open for business. And that's really
And Erica, what about the opportunities for new development in Milwaukee? You said that you have quite a bit going on, but what do you see as your near-term future?
It's lots of cranes on our skyline, that's for sure. We have a separate department here within the city that focuses only on bringing development into the city, and they do a phenomenal job. Obviously, our overlap comes when plans are ready to be reviewed and shovels are ready to hit the dirt. But even before that, I think our role is very important in those meetings, like Dr. Johnson alluded to, where developers are trying to figure out which community they want to invest in. And if we can provide those reassurances and an explanation of how our process works so that they can best prepare, I think that alleviates a lot of the fear of bureaucracy, if you will, and gives people some assurance that their project will move forward in a reasonable time frame. But it's like every open spot of land downtown right now and through some of the neighboring suburbs neighborhoods, it's just going gangbusters. We can't even keep up with it, which is wonderful, but definitely a challenge.
Yep.
So you want to be known as a city that can process well and quickly but accurately, and you don't want to be the city that has a major fault in construction that then fingers are pointed, of course, at those who are responsible for the inspections. Bill, what about your situation with regard to attracting developers to the community? You have so much activity going on in Nashville.
Yeah, we don't have the problem of attracting developers. Our problem is trying to keep up with the developers, and that's kind of been the subject of this conversation. Our biggest problem is developers that are from out of town that are coming in and building in Nashville. We're seeing developers from all over the United States. With local developers, they know our processes and they navigate them seamlessly. Out of town developers don't. And so what we've done to try to assist them is we will set up pre-development meetings with them. We'll bring in their crew, they'll come in, we'll sit down, we'll go over the project. We'll make suggestions on how to permit the project, how to do it appropriately the first time so we don't have to go back and correct mistakes later. So we're doing everything we can to try to educate them as to our systems. But again, our biggest problem really is dealing with the out-of-town developers that don't know our systems and aren't familiar with them. So we're trying to educate them.
Mm-hmm. That's good. I don't know, Amanda, if we have any questions yet we'd like to cover in our remaining time. A little bit of conversation about the American Rescue Plan Act, but before we launch into that, are there any questions from our audience on any of the conversation that's occurred so far?
You know, there's none that have come in yet. I think you guys have done a phenomenal job of kind of hitting on all the topics and explaining everything. So nothing has come in yet, but if there is anyone that has a question, please feel free to drop it in the question box.
Well, good. Maybe this next conversation will stimulate a little bit of further questioning of our panel members. But Eric, can you talk a little bit about the Dallas strategy for utilizing the new funding that's coming available? I know for the major cities in Texas and across the country, it's a lot of money that needs to be spent over the next 3 to 4 years. And so what's your strategy on utilization of those dollars that will go away? Of course, those are not continuing dollars. So that's, it's a challenge when you get the windfall, but then you have to figure out how do we continue funding after the monies are gone?
Yeah, let me just say first, it's been somewhat a bit disappointing in terms of the interpretation, in terms of how you can use the funds, right? Because our original thought was, we thought we were going to be able to do some real big, mind-blowing things. So it started to take us back a little bit, but our main focus will be heavily on infrastructure for affordable housing, infrastructure in general, and looking at replacement of potential lost revenue through the city. We're going to be looking mainly at those ideas, but heavy push towards infrastructure in support of affordable housing is something we're going to be looking at. According to a Nexus study we completed with Bay Area Economics, in the next 25 years, we're looking at a total shortage of about 272,000 housing units. So logic is telling us we have to do more, and that's where we're going to really target our efforts.
Okay. Erica, what is the city of Milwaukee doing in terms of the ARPA monies, the Recovery Act monies? Infrastructure is a good one because then that's not recurring. That is O&M cost in the long term. Affordable housing is in crisis mode across the country as well. What does Milwaukee have planned?
Those are definitely some of the focus that we are hearing here locally. For us, it's a bit of a power struggle between our administration and our council, who have different ideas about how to spend the money. We received just under $400 million here in the city, and $55 million annually will go to revenue loss, just to make up some of those losses in past years. We're also facing a pretty big pension issue, and while funds cannot go directly to fund that pension issue, we can supplant other projects and initiatives that then can, and I call it the slide puzzle, we can move one piece over and then that piece can free up for something else. So there's a bit of that going on. But in terms of boots hitting the ground, we're definitely looking at a very large housing and lead initiative, which will experience some contractor delays and issues. So there's just not enough of them to go around. Some eviction protections and education, as well as a lot of work within the community for just a variety of equity initiatives as well. And again, our administration has been very keen on the fact that these are dollars that end, so we don't want to create an additional legacy costs, other costs to the city that we have to incur beyond the funding program.
That's good. We do have a couple of questions, but Bill, before we go on to that, do you want to comment on what Nashville is doing with regard to the American Rescue Plan Act dollars that are coming to your city?
Well, being that we're the Department of Codes Administration, that's probably really under the mayor's purview and perhaps our Department of Public Works and National Department of Transportation. That said, I can't say this. I can say that, like Dr. Johnson said, affordable housing is a key issue for Nashville right now. So I would suspect, not putting words in their mouth, but I would suspect that that would be a major component of how those funds may be spent.
Mm-hmm. Well, we have another question for you, Bill, since you're speaking right now and unmuted. What software does Nashville use for plan review?
We're using Bluebeam for plan review, and our platform is CityWorks.
Erica or Eric, do you use that similar platform, or is that?
Well, we're using Project Docs, and we have an old system called Posse from the 1800s that we're using.
Oh my goodness. Okay.
Yeah, we have
You
an
got your hands full. Erica, I'm sorry.
My apologies. No, we do use an older system as well, but again, one of the technology wins of COVID is we will be introducing electronic plan review, hopefully by year's end. We're primarily on paper at this point, so that will be a big lift for us.
And what about virtual inspections? Is that something that you think could be employed by your community? Virtual inspections, have you experienced that, and has it been successful? What changes would you recommend if you've done some of that? Erica, you were nodding your head yes. You want to begin?
Sure. We did some of it during the height of COVID when we had inspectors who were very concerned about being in properties. We found it clunky, to be real honest. You'd really have to find the right software to do it well. What we learned is that someone walking on the job site with an iPad, being in a Zoom call or a FaceTime call with an inspector, got the job done, but it was clunky, it was slow. If you have motion sickness issues, you may not want to attempt it at all. And you really can't see the full scope of the job. You only see what that individual is willing to show you with their camera lens. So it worked in a few. I certainly don't think it's the right fit for life safety issues or bigger scale projects. where you're really looking at the totality of a job or a floor or something of that nature.
Mhm. Mhm. Okay. Anyone else have experience, Dr. Johnson or Bill, on virtual inspections?
We
Yeah,
made a decision.
No, go ahead, Bill.
Sorry, okay, thank you, Dr. Johnson. We made a decision throughout COVID, that we would stay live with all of our inspections in person. It's my understanding that our fire marshal's office did use virtual type of inspections for a period of time, but to use Erica's words, they were in fact clunky and didn't go well. For the coach department, our inspection turnaround times are next day service, and so we just haven't seen the need, quite frankly.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're not doing anything on the virtual side. We got really caught in a bad situation. We went to a electronic process, and we thought we were going to have maybe 20% COVID-19 hits. It goes from 20% to basically almost 100% overnight, and we were not prepared for that. So we're just really trying to figure out what the path forward is going to be, quite honestly.
Hmm. Okay. And we had one more question with regard to third-party inspections. Any experience on that you'd like to share in terms of lessons learned and what you'd recommend to others? Eric, you were shaking your head on that one.
No, I was shaking because we're moving to third-party inspections as an option, probably beginning in the first quarter of 2021. So if anybody has any experiences, good, bad, or indifferent, shoot me a note to let me know what to look out for.
Okay. Others, Erica or Bill, any comments on third-party inspections?
Well, I'm happy to go. We don't use them often. In fact, I was amazed that this budget year I was able to get some of our elevator periodics outsourced, which again, if you haven't figured out, the climate in my community is to not do that type of thing. But the reason we were able to do it was because we had job positions open for years with no applicants. And we were unable to complete our annual required by the state periodic inspections of those conveyances. And so I was able to make the case, A, it paid for itself, and B, life safety issues we resolved inspections was pretty good. So we did an RFP, we got a few bidders, and we're about ready. I think we're in the process right now, so they should be hitting the streets very soon. And for us, it was about demonstrating lost revenue and safety, because again, our climate is just such that they want the jobs to stay with our residents as soon as possible.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's good. Outside contracting, especially in a heavy labor state. I worked for 15 years in Kalamazoo, Michigan, was city manager there, and I think I spent a third of my time with labor attorneys while working in that city. And yet we still have to get the job done because the public doesn't really care what your challenges are as much as they want the service that they're paying for, and they want to move the community forward, just as you do as a leader. Well, we're coming to the close, but before we sign off, and I want to be respectful of everyone's time as well as those who are listening in today, any final comments, maybe one or two recommendations to others on what to think about in terms of making your building department an even better place to be. Maybe we could just, in a minute each, comment on what those two or three things might be. Anyone want to go first, or
I'll go first.
Okay.
In the context of fighting this battle for pay, I think being able to offer creative opportunities, challenging projects that can go beyond the pay issue, I think is something that we have to consider. And what I mean by that is the opportunity to lead initiatives and different things that hopefully could resonate more with purpose that people would tend to look at. I probably would throw that out there to add to the equation. It's something I'm looking at. creating a bunch of, not a bunch, but a series of special initiatives. And I'm going to place an open call out. I'm looking for leaders that will emerge, that want to take on some challenging projects. And I'm hoping that type of thinking can keep some of the people in place. And that's how I'm looking at it.
That's great. Erica, your thoughts?
Sure. One of the greatest lessons I think I've learned in the past 2 years in this job particularly is to not be afraid to open your doors to the development community and let them talk to you, good, bad, and ugly. It's easy to keep them at arm's length because you don't want to hear them complain at you. You don't want to hear about all the problems you already know you have. But I have found some really good communication, constructive communications with really key people in the community who then become an advocate for you if they understand what it is you're trying to achieve. And so for me, that was, for example, I closed our development center for literally 36 hours to go from in-person to fully remote when COVID hit. And people went nuts. But that community that I had developed and the people that I had started to talk to worked their way out into their colleagues and said, relax, they're handling this, it's okay. And so they were some of the best advocates for us when we needed them. So I would just say, get it all, the good, bad, and the ugly, and be open to it.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Know those data points that you need to know about. Know the facts, as Jim Collins would say in Good to Great. Get that data and know the ugly facts as well. Bill, any final comments that you'd like to make this afternoon?
I'd say one thing that Nashville has done better, at least the coach department in Nashville, is to think outside the box. Let's get away from doing things the way that they've always been done. We've got some remarkable technology out there. Let's use it if we can. I couldn't agree more with reaching out to the development community. And we've done that by hiring some outside third-party consultants to come and take a look at all of Nashville's development process, not just the codes department, but all departments that are involved in development. Let's look at those processes. Let's get to the low-hanging fruit. Let's solve those problems quickly, and then let's delve into the deeper problems, see if we can't solve this to make development overall easier for everybody. That's the goal.
Yeah, I'm thinking back on a book that we used in one of our executive retreats several years ago entitled Extreme Government Makeover. And it was about how do you unkink the pipes that happen over time as you add another regulation because you had a problem here. And so you add a requirement or a challenge that was politically excitable in the community, and so you add some more regulation, and pretty soon you can't even get the water through the pipes. There are so many, and so to be able to sit down every so often on a routine basis and examine what are we doing, do we really need to be doing all of these things, and how do we streamline the process. Last thing I'd say is that we focused on those three most important things: cycle time, quality, and consistency of inspections, and thirdly, creating a culture of how to. You know, in government work, it's easy to tell someone no. How do I get in trouble if I tell someone no, you can't do that? But it takes a different type of individual and approach to say, not this, however, here are two alternatives you might consider on how to get this project advanced. Creating that kind of culture takes time, but can be done and not that long, especially if you're able to reward your employees for taking on that kind of work. Well, I want to say thank you to SAFEbuilt for organizing this discussion this afternoon. I think it's been very valuable to those who are listening and to those who will listen, since you've recorded it for others to hear about. And I do want to thank our three panelists today, Bill Herbert, Erica Roberts, and Dr. Eric Anthony Johnson. Thank you three for being here. Steve Burns and Amanda Gilliam, thank you so much for organizing this event. I hope it'll be helpful to those who are managing building development operations.
Yeah, thank you to everyone.
Thank
who
you.
attended. Thank you, and our panelists and those that attended. You know, I've been in this industry since 1999. I worked 11 years for local government and then came to work for SAFEbuilt 11 years ago. And the amount of changes that have gone on in the industry and the challenges that have from the Great Recession and then to COVID and last year, we've seen a lot of changes, and it sounds like all of you have managed to them very well with your thinking outside the box. So enjoyable to be in this industry on the private side now for the last 11 years, working with SAFEbuilt, working in over 28 states, providing professional, technical, and private provider services across the country. And I think learnings from folks like you and the people that attend the meetings like this can only benefit all of us, whether we're on the public side or on the private side. So thank you all. And thanks to Amanda and Christina from the marketing department.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you so
Thank
much,
you, everyone.
everybody.
Thank you. Bye, guys.